In the manuscript vault of the Bodleian Library in Oxford, a bound volume labeled Bruce 74 holds 4 lines of handwritten Ge'ez beneath a heading no English Bible has ever printed. The second parable, concerning those who deny the name. Whatever those 4 lines say, the Council of Laodicea decided in 364 CE that no congregation should read them, and voted the entire Book of Enoch out of Scripture along with it. Here is what makes this specific passage stranger than the rest of the ban. When 11 copies of Enoch surfaced from the Dead Sea Scroll caves in 1947, confirming a text far older than most specialists had believed, one entire stretch came back silent. Chapters 37 through 71, the section this passage belongs to, produced no Aramaic fragment at Qumran. Not one scrap, not one corner, nothing. Every other section of Enoch has some Dead Sea backup, confirming it existed in something close to its current form 2,000 years ago. This section survives only in the Ethiopic tradition, the same one that carried Bruce 74 out of Aksum and into a Scottish explorer's trunk in 1773, then into this library, where it sat largely unread outside a small circle of specialists ever since. Michael Knibb's 1978 Oxford Critical Edition, still the standard English reference for the Ethiopic text, notes that the parables section shows a consistency across independent copies that argues against casual scribal invention. R.H. Charles reached the same wording 50 years earlier, working from an entirely different manuscript line. James Vanderkam of Notre Dame has written that whatever community produced this material understood itself to be describing something with real consequences, not a metaphor. What that council removed was not a description of fire, a courtroom, or a seat reserved somewhere on your behalf. Every account of the afterlife this channel has opened before now has described a place, a location you could point to, even a terrible one. This passage describes the opposite of a place. Stay through what follows, because by the end of this, you will understand exactly why a church that could preach hell without hesitation and preach heaven as the reward for avoiding it found this specific 4-line clause too dangerous to leave sitting in anyone's Bible. The church has always offered exactly 2 doors: suffer behind one, rest behind the other. Enoch's second parable does not open a third door beside them. It describes what happens to a person for whom neither door exists at all, and it does not soften that claim with any figure of speech. Here is the line itself, copied out of Bruce 74 exactly as Knibb rendered it from the Ge'ez, and matched almost word for word by Charles working from an entirely separate manuscript tradition. Into the heaven they shall not ascend, and on the earth they shall not come. The heading above those 4 lines does more work than the lines themselves, and it is worth sitting with before going further. The parable is addressed to those who deny the name of the dwelling of the holy ones and the Lord of spirits, not the taking of a life, not a debt left unpaid to someone who was wronged, not even the sustaining of harm this channel has already spent a full episode sorting through. This is a different question altogether, one about denial rather than action, about walking away from the name rather than doing damage with your hands. Whatever a person did or did not do with their life sits outside this parable's concern entirely. The only thing that matters here is whether they turned and said the name did not apply to them. Sit with what that means for a moment, because it collapses something most people never think to question. Every framework the church has ever preached assumes exactly 2 outcomes waiting on the other side of a life. Somewhere to suffer, somewhere to rest, and every soul sorted into one or the other according to what they did. That assumption is so old and so unexamined that most people mistake it for the only possible shape an afterlife could take. Enoch's second parable does not offer a third outcome sitting beside those 2. It describes a category the 2-outcome model has no room for at all, a group the verse places outside, both without spending a single word explaining where they go instead. Because that is the detail worth pausing on longest. The verse does not say where, it says where not. Into the heaven they do not go. Onto the earth they do not come. Nothing about fire, nothing about a courtroom, a ledger kept somewhere, a seat assigned in advance, a guardian posted at a gate. Every other judgment this book describes comes furnished with some kind of structure, some address a reader could point to even if they would never want to visit it. George Nicholsberg and James Vanderkam, whose 2012 Hermania commentary remains the most detailed line-by-line treatment of this exact chapter available in English, note that the parable's language here is deliberately spare compared to the elaborate architecture found elsewhere in the book. That contrast is not an accident of style. The absence of scenery is the point being made. Ancient readers who expected an afterlife to come with geography, the way almost every account from that world does, would have felt this omission immediately, the same way a listener notices a held silence in music more than they notice the notes around it. And here is where the verse does something almost nobody quoting it stops long enough to notice. 2 lines later, in the same breath, it says these are people preserved for the day of suffering and tribulation. Not destroyed, not simply erased out of existence the way silence might imply. Preserved, held, which means whatever eventually happens to them has not happened yet. There is a reckoning still coming, named directly in the text, and the text gives it no date, no location, no description of what it involves once it arrives. Every other sinner this channel has walked through has already been sorted into a specific condition, a specific place, a specific set of consequences already underway. This is the only group in the entire book whose sentence has been announced and whose location for serving it does not exist. That is worth sitting with against everything a two-door system promises its followers. Hell, whatever else it is, has already seated its residents. There is a structure to point to, a category to be sorted into, an account that has already been opened and is already being kept. This verse describes something that has not even reached that stage. A judgment promised, with nowhere yet built for it to happen, held indefinitely in a condition with no coordinates at all. If suffering somewhere is one kind of consequence, waiting for a sentence with nowhere to serve it while both doors stay closed in front of you might be a colder one, and the text gives no indication of how long that waiting is meant to last. It does, however, say something about where the doors themselves are eventually headed, and that detail changes the shape of this whole question again. Here is the part that changes everything again. The parable does not stop at heaven and earth as they are right now. A few lines later, it says, God will make a new heaven and a new earth, not repair the old ones, build new ones, and the righteous will live there. The text says it plainly. The sinners and evildoers shall not set foot thereon. Read that slowly. This is not about today's heaven. This is not about today's earth. This is about the next one, the one that has not been built yet. And already, before the first stone of it is set down, one group is written out of the plans. Think about what that means. A punishment usually comes after something happens. You do wrong. Then you are punished. But this is not that. This is a name left off a list before the building even starts. It is not a door closing on someone. It is a door that was never going to open for them in the first place, because the blueprint never included one. That is a strange kind of judgment. Most judgments react to something. This one does not react. It was already decided, before the new earth exists, before the new sky exists. The exclusion comes first, the world comes after. The text does not stop at exclusion either. It says what the righteous get instead, and it says it in plain, warm words. They will live in peace. They will be satisfied. God will live among them. Every good thing named in that promise is a thing this other group will simply never touch, not because it is taken away from them, but because it was never theirs to lose in the first place. One group gets a home built just for them. The other group gets left off the plans for any home at all. Now hold that thought next to something modern, something that has nothing to do with old books at all. In 2003, 2 researchers named Naomi Eisenberger and Kipling Williams ran a simple study. They had people play a computer game where a ball got passed around. Then, quietly, the other players stopped passing the ball to one person, just left them out. Nothing loud, no insult, no shove, just silence and a ball that stopped coming. While this happened, the researchers scanned the left-out player's brain. The area that lit up was not the sadness area. It was the pain area, the same part of the brain that lights up when your hand touches something hot. Being left out did not feel like sadness to the brain. It felt like an injury. And this was just one afternoon, one small game, one short silence. The feeling faded once the game ended and the person went home. Sit with that next to the verse. A place that will not have you in it. Not a place that hurts you once you arrive. A place that was never going to have room for you at all. The brain treats being left out as a wound. The old text treats being left out of both realms the same way, only stretched across forever instead of one afternoon. This is why the shape of this fate matters so much. It is not a location you could ever reach and suffer inside. It is not a system with levels or record keepers or a seat with your name on it. This channel has already shown you a place built entirely out of chambers and a place built entirely out of records. Neither one of those fits what this verse describes. This is something else. Not a room, not a ledger. A closed door on a building that was never going to have a room built for you in the first place. No fire waiting inside it. No angel guarding it. Just an absence, planned out ahead of time, with your name already left off the guest list before the house was ever framed. And that raises the real question this whole video has been building toward. If the church had a place for the wicked and a place for the faithful, why would it also hide a third outcome that is neither? What would a church actually lose by admitting a fate like this exists? The Council of Laodicea met in 364 CE to settle a practical question. Which books could a congregation read aloud and trust? The list it produced, the one later copied into canon collections across the Latin and Greek-speaking world, left Enoch off entirely. Every line examined so far in this video, the denial clause, the preserved but unplaced sentence, the plan for a new heaven and earth that already excludes a name before the first stone is laid, went out the door with the rest of the book. Not edited, not softened, removed whole. Augustine, writing decades later in the City of God, addressed the book directly rather than ignoring it. He acknowledged it likely contained some genuine ancient material, then argued against relying on it, questioning how a text written before the flood could have reliably survived to his own century at all. He did not attack what the book said. He attacked whether anyone could trust the chain that carried it forward. That is a different objection than calling something false, and it is worth noticing how often the men who excluded this book took that same approach, arguing around the content rather than against it directly. It is worth asking why a council with dozens of decisions to make that year spent any attention on this one at all. A general hell, one place, one fire, one category called sinners, is simple to build a church around. Preach against sin, offer confession, promise absolution to whoever walks back through the door. The system only works if there is always a door to walk back through, and always a specific wrongdoing to be forgiven for. That is the entire architecture behind centuries of sermons, and it depends on exactly two outcomes waiting at the end, each one reachable by the same lever the church controls. This parable does not hand the church that lever. A person is not placed outside both realms because of a specific sin that can be confessed and cleared. They are placed there because of a denial, a turning away from the name itself, and the text does not describe any mechanism for reversing that placement once made. There is no sacrament aimed at a status rather than an act. There is no absolution designed to restore someone to a home that was never built with a room for them in the first place. A church built on offering forgiveness for what you did has no obvious tool for a fate that was never about what you did at all. Think back to the empty chair around that computer game, the one this video already described. Being left out did not require anyone to do anything to the person being excluded. It just required everyone else to stop including them. There was no apology that could undo it after the fact, because nothing had been done that needed undoing. The exclusion itself was the entire event. Enoch's second parable describes the same shape stretched across eternity, a status rather than a sentence. And a church whose entire authority rests on administering sentences has very little to offer someone whose fate was never a sentence to begin with. That may be the real reason a 4-line clause about denial, sitting quietly inside a much longer book about angels and calendars and storehouses, drew a council's attention at all. Not because it was frightening. Hell was already frightening, and the church had centuries of practice making that fear useful. This clause was dangerous for a narrower reason. It described a fate the church had no lever to reach, no confession booth built to address, no path back through a door that was never going to open regardless of what was said inside it. Bruce 74 still sits in its storage box in the Bodleian's vault, 4 lines still carrying a heading most readers never see translated into English. The Ge'ez word for name still waits on that page for whoever requests the folio next. Somewhere in that same tradition, a church that built an entire architecture of sin and forgiveness quietly decided this particular 4-line clause did not fit inside it. So here is the question actually worth sitting with once the manuscript is closed and put away. If a church can build a door out of confession and a door out of judgment, what happens to its authority the moment a person stands in front of a wall where neither door exists at all?